Wow. We've opened Memorial Day weekend up. The beaches are full. Lake Ozark in Missouri's packed. Pools, parties, craziness, masks, no masks. Meanwhile, racial tensions are flaring all over the country, whether it's New York City, Minneapolis, or Chicago. And we're only like 50 days into this whole quarantine lockdown world. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live. Let's start talking.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there.
My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News, but news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Live streaming all over the world. Periscope, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. You're there, we're there. Trying to build a loyal following and just create a conversation. Get people talking, thinking. Whatever viewpoint you have, my show's here to help you try to have another one. Hey, Bruce, how you doing today? Bruce is my producer. Love to have him come on and say hello.
What's going on, guys?
He's the alternate version of me. He's me if I was a techie and wore a tie. You know, Bruce, I have to tell you, I'm so anti-tie that when I met the President of the United States a number of years back, they asked me, I was a young political activist tearing it up in DC. They said, Rob, you have to wear a tie. It's the president. I'm like, I don't wear ties. They're like, it's the president. I'm like, no. They're like, you wear t-shirts everywhere. I'm like, yeah, just like this. They're like, will you wear a jacket? So I ended up wearing a jacket, but no tie, even for the president. I don't know if that's good or bad, just who I am.
Oh, well, I wear it as a tie to show respect to you and your following. So.
Wow. See, that's what people would say. And that's a clip-on, right?
No, this is
oh,
the real.
I know. It's a knot up. Hang yourself by that thing. And right now, Bruce, I think a lot of people are feeling like hanging themselves. And that's not funny, but it is. But it's kind of sadly true. This is a tough time for a lot of people. And we're going to get into it. Before we move on, Bruce, I just want to tell everybody about our Friday show real quick, because it's one I'm really excited about. Friday at 6 p.m. Pacific time, we do the Rob Nelson Live, and I have a special guest each week. And the special guest this week is a pastor from Brad Bailey, Pastor Brad Bailey from the West Side Vineyard Church in Los Angeles, which is a big non-denominational church out here. He's been really active, involved in the whole process of churches opening. Really interesting discussion about faith, people losing their faith, finding their faith, and about the political divide in our narratives around the whole opening. And it's not what you would think necessarily. Not everybody in the church movement is like, let's open up. So it's going to be a really cool conversation on a lot of levels. I'm excited to have everybody be part of it.
Same here. I'll be here helping you out on Friday too. Yeah,
you're a person of faith, Bruce. You'll enjoy this.
That's me. I know a lot of people aren't, but I still stay true. I mean, I've seen a lot of signs just in the past 6 months myself. So,
hey, listen, when we'll talk about those on Friday. All right.
Later, guys. See ya.
All right. Time for the rant. So, and by the way, anytime you want, love to get your comments and your texts and your view on whatever we're talking about. So just type them in. Some of you have a link. You can find a link. It's on my socials and you can actually call in. But if not, just text in what you're thinking. Just getting part of the conversation that way. I like to keep it super interactive. So here's the deal. Memorial Day was kind of a tipping point. We all saw it coming, right? On Memorial Day, people were like pent up and you saw it. Some states had started to open early, Georgia, Florida. Other states had really held back, like California. Some states, like Wisconsin, my home state, were closed, and then the court overturned the governor's order, and everything just opened automatically. But overall, I think people felt, come Memorial Day, the pressure was building. I know in California, for example, it was a matter of, they were going to either let people go to the beaches or people were going to go to the beaches. They can say, we decided it was time. They decided we had no choice. Like, we're going to have a flood if we don't. And so you saw all over the country something kind of surprising and shocking. And I like to see, again, we're living kind of in two worlds. You saw a world of people who suddenly let loose and just headed out all at once, all in masks. And many of them not in masks. In masks, but not in masks. Crowding into places. Now, there were some places where people really did practice social distancing. But overall, you saw lots of images and pictures. And I'm not saying I pick on the media a lot. I'm not saying the media was misrepresenting it. There were places, plenty of them, where people were just like, we're done. We're done. We're going out. We're having fun. And we're partying at the pool. Lake Ozark in Missouri literally looked like spring break. I mean, people were just piled in. People piling into pools, piling into lakes, piling into bars, drinking, laughing, swimming. Not only not 6 feet apart, but very often without masks. And then you saw other places where people did a little better job. I think in California on the beaches, more people kept some social distancing. But overall, I would say in general around beaches and water communities, and it's a question, why do beaches and water communities tend to like relax around this stuff more? People weren't wearing masks for the most part. And I'm not judging that one way or the other. That's a whole conversation we can have, and I've had before, the mask versus the not mask. What I'm focused on is why, when suddenly people came out, was there a mass pile up onto the beaches and sort of a party like, you know, till 1994, whatever the song is from way back in the day. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One of them is what I call the sort of the disciplined, the overly disciplined child one. You know, like when you're a kid, when you're a parent or a kid, you're a teenager. If your parents are super restrictive, you always try to break the rules. It's like the movie Footloose. You know, the more they tell you can't, the more they say you can't do this, can't do this, can't do this, the more you go out and try and do it and get away with it. And perhaps do things you shouldn't do, take risks you shouldn't take. Whereas the parents who are a little more liberal, not politically, but behaviorally, go ahead. If you're going to party, bring your friends to the house. We know you're going to probably have some drinks. So if you have a drink, you let us know and you take an Uber home. We don't really want you to drink, but we know you're probably going to at some point. What we don't want you to do is lie about it, end up in a car driving drunk or with a drunk driver and end up dead. The more liberal parents in that way tend to see their kids kind of self-police, if you will. And I know that. I come from a family that was like that. On the one hand, I came from a very conservative Christian faith with a lot of rules, but my parents were very tolerant about behavior. It's like, have the friends over to our house, have people over to our house. We don't really want you to do certain kinds of activities, but if you are going to do them on our property where we know you're safe. And then I saw kids whose parents were hyper restrictive, and those kids got in more trouble than anyone. They were trying to break every rule there was. Well, that's a little my theory around this lockdown. The more people felt locked down, the more they felt like their parents, the government, was telling them they couldn't do anything. You can't go outside. You can't go to the beach. You can't go on bike trails. You can't go to work. You can go to the grocery store. You can do responsible behavior like shopping or the doctor, but you can't go to your friends. You can't do anything till we tell you you can. And the more people felt like, I got it at first, but I'm starting to feel like maybe that's not in my best interest at this point. I'm kind of dying on the inside here. Once they had a shot, once the door opened, they just went crazy. They're like, F it. I'm going out and I don't care. I'm breaking all the rules. I'm not saying that's a good thing. We're going to find out how damaging that was. And it could be damaging. We could find there are new outbreaks because people were not properly social distancing. And this becomes interesting for one reason in particular. And it's something I've talked about from the beginning. And we'll keep going back to this science thing. I'm getting a little annoyed at the political divide around science and not science. Because again, the left and the Democrats tend to say, we follow science. It's become a new mantra. Whereas the conservatives and the Republicans tend to say, we follow common sense. Well, common sense and science can work together. You're allowed to have both. And science is selective. Again, I've said this before. People choose the facts they want to use. So you can have, I'm not saying you have alternate sets of facts. I'm saying you can have two sets of facts that are simultaneously both true and not contradictory, right? So you can have a set of facts that is, this is a highly infectious disease that we don't have a vaccine for, and that we have a high percentage of people who can spread this disease who may not even know they have it. That's a set of facts. Thus, wear a mask, because you might give it to someone who don't even know you have it. And the other set of facts that's the same thing is you have a highly infectious disease in which up to 80% of the people who get it will show no symptoms. Therefore, that is why they could spread the disease without even knowing it, because they're not coughing on anyone. They're not, I use the hand, I know, right? You speak the elbow. They're not coughing on anyone. They don't even know they're sick. But that side of the facts is the 80 up to 80%. You can look at all the science and all the studies. I mean, the nursing home studies, the prison studies, the studies in Italy and Spain, the studies where they have the USS Roosevelt, the U.S. service, the destroyer, where they had the aircraft carrier, where they had a quarantined group of people all together. And the numbers are astonishing. In some nursing homes in the U.S., they found they're up to 80% of people were infected and didn't know they have it. And this is old people. So you have an asymptomatic number that makes you more likely to spread it, but also more likely to be completely fine. If 80+% of people getting it, as high as 90% in some places, aren't showing symptoms, well, then you're thinking, I'm safe to go outside. And yeah, you are perhaps risking infecting the other 10 to 20% who are not okay at getting it. Although 80% of those people are supposed to be okay, just have mild symptoms. So you got a pretty small population that's at risk of getting it really bad and dying, which is, again, unfortunate. But you have a whole giant population that's going, and as I've said before, I'm fed up, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And they're not just entitled brats. They're people who are watching their lives get ruined. And I think we've underplayed the psychological, emotional damage that's being caused by this. Forget about the economic damage, the psychological consequences. People, we're social beings. People are going a little crazy. Suicides are going up. Depression, they estimate, there's numbers out there that estimate as high as 30% of the US population is experiencing severe depression and anxiety right now. 30%. I'm a person who's dealt with depression my whole life, clinical depression. I know what it's like to feel the way I see a whole lot of people feeling now who normally are happy-go-lucky or happy or fine. They're feeling what I often feel when you're like, it's a good day. Why am I sad? Like, I'm alive. I can breathe. The sun is out. I should be happy, but I'm depressed. That's a clinically depressed person. It's inside you. It's chemical. We're seeing up to 30%, 20% of the population experiencing severe depression and anxiety right now. That's a serious health problem. So those people are going, I got to do something to get over it. And unfortunately, a lot of times their reaction is an overreaction, like a manic depressive reaction. They go from down to 100 miles an hour. I'm on the beach, I'm partying, I'm swimming, I'm drinking, I'm playing, I'm laughing, I don't care. Give me a kiss. Woohoo! Forget about the virus. Not saying that's good, saying that's the reality. But there's a second reason this reality happens. And this comes down to the political divide we are in, and what I'm going to call the weaponizing part you've heard a lot, the weaponizing of everything around this disease. Everyone involved politically is to blame for this. So let's just start by me saying, very few leaders are free of this. Democrats and Republicans both play into this game, as does most of the mainstream media. And what happens is you have information coming out. So the Democrats and the anti-Trump people and most of the mainstream media, they hate Trump so much that anything Trump says, they are going to weaponize. They are going to dismiss. They are going to discredit. I know he says some messed up stuff, but if you're objective and watch much of what he says, if someone else had said it, I don't mean some of the way he says certain things, and certainly sometimes the things he says, but if another person said it, it wouldn't get the same blowback. I mean, you can see that with Governor Andrew Cuomo. Governor Cuomo has said some of the same things Trump has said when it comes to this disease. Again, I'm not talking about the crazy Trumpisms or Trump attacking people. I'm just saying when it comes to the disease. And yet, if Trump said it, the other side, the Democrats and the media, go ballistic on it. And so since Trump has pushed for reopening, and by the way, I'm sick of people going, this push to reopen, we need to slow down. You need to understand, why wouldn't any leader want to reopen their economy? Trump doesn't just want to get reelected. Of course he does. You want to reopen your economy because it's the lifeline to hundreds of millions of people's future. So Obama would want to open the economy as fast as he could. Andrew Cuomo would want to open the economy as fast as he could. Any leader would want to open their economy as fast as they could. Yet when Trump says that, the left, the Democrats, and much of the mainstream media go ballistic on him. They go absolutely ballistic. as if he's just out to get reelected. He's short-sighted. He's stupid. He doesn't care. He won't wear a mask, etc., etc., etc. I'm not saying there's no valid criticisms of Trump, nor am I saying that Trump's doing a great job here. I think it's ironic that in the most critical time, the critical crisis we faced as a nation in my lifetime, in a century, maybe ever, we have the least empathetic president and the most divisive president ever. But that doesn't mean he's not doing certain things right. He'll get no credit for that. And what that does is it creates the basis for the other side to react. Now, the Republicans are doing the same thing. And Trump is a total baiter. He picks fights everywhere he can. He's a complete, I think, megalomaniac in many ways. And he definitely makes things all about himself. And the slightest insult, the slightest thing he makes about him. That doesn't help either. That's just as destructive. It's just as polarizing instead of being the bigger guy. He doesn't get free on this one. But both sides play this game, and the media stops being a fair arbiter. They start being seen as having one side or another. If it's Fox News, it's one side. If it's most of the rest of the mainstream cable broadcast media, it's the other side. And then there's print and web internet media in between. And people start just trusting the narrative they already think because they don't actually trust other information sources. You don't any longer see the news as being objective. Now, here's the thing that kind of really feeds into that. And this is where I think we're seeing why what we're seeing is happening. Because there's a hypocrisy in it. If the political leadership was doing what they say, if they were following the rules they lay out, if they were being consistent, if they weren't being hypocritical when it's their side versus the other side, and the media the same way, was looking at things rather objectively, rather fairly, you won't find any positive coverage of Donald Trump from CNN ever, or MSNBC, ever. Doesn't matter what he says, it will not be positive coverage. Then you better have, if you're going to take these extreme views, you better stick to them. You know, the Pope can't be caught going off and having sex. It's going to backfire. And that's the problem. We've seen all these high profile leaders do the very thing they're telling us not to do. And media people too. I talked before about Caitlin, the CNN reporter, Caitlin Conner, saying, you know, picking on Trump for not wearing a mask, having a mask on in the White House briefing room. And the minute the cameras were off, so she thought, pulling the mask off, still in the same briefing room, still surrounded by all the people, nothing changed. The cameras went away, she thought, but the people didn't. And walking into a crowd of fellow reporters and talking. You saw Chris Cuomo saying, stay at home and quarantine if you have this disease like I do. And even if you don't, if you think you've been exposed, stay at home and quarantine. And then you saw him get in a car and drive without a mask to another property, not his home, a home he was building with family and friends, and get confronted by a person who was a Democrat riding a bike going, what are you doing? That makes the news. People see it. You saw Governor Whitmer in Michigan, the hardest, toughest lockdowns in the country in many ways, fighting why we need these lockdowns, telling people, I don't know if you know Michigan, but northern Michigan's a big vacation spot. It's like northern Wisconsin. It's beautiful in the summer. People like to go up there. They'll drive 150, 200 miles to get to those lakes. Telling people, don't go vacation up there. If you don't live there, if you don't, actually that's your residence, don't go there. And then having her husband call a boat company in that place, not where they live, up north, 150 miles from where they actually live, and seeing if they could take his boat in early. And when they said, we can't get your boat in early, we're too backlogged because of the closures, he said, does it matter if I'm the governor's husband? Would that help? Now, first, Whitmer denies it, says it never happened. It's a story, it's made up. And a Republican legislature from the Senate actually had been talking about it, pulls down his post, says, okay, I want to be fair. And then it comes out, actually, no, more evidence that it did. And she finally admits it did happen. So she not only it happened, she lies about it. And then says, no, it did happen. And says, well, he was joking. Okay, it wasn't joking. I mean, I don't care. But that's the most pathetic thing of all. Instead of saying, I really screwed up, it's like, oh, it's a bad joke. Well, if it's a bad joke, why didn't you admit it in the first place? But the point is, you're telling everyone to stay home. You're telling people not to go vacation up north in Michigan. And then your husband's asking if he can maybe get his boat in early because he's the governor's wife. It's another example of people in power, and I'm spacing on what state it was. It is South Carolina, maybe, where the governor went to the beach and didn't have a mask on, didn't know the cameras were on, going to the beach to talk about wearing a mask for Memorial Day, not wearing a mask. And then a day ago, you had a reporter on, it might have been CNN, covering people not wearing masks at, maybe it was Lake Ozark, but it was at a Memorial Day, lake place. And they're going, see, no one's wearing, it was CNN, no one's wearing masks. No one's wearing masks. And he points at a guy in a Packers shirt. I'm a Packer fan, by the way, from Wisconsin, and says he's not wearing a mask. And the Packer fan points back and goes, your cameraman's not wearing a mask. And he wasn't. So it's like, okay, you're on the air with a mask on, telling people to wear a mask and how important it is, and pointing out how shocking it is that people aren't wearing them. And your own camera guy's not wearing a mask, which makes people go, is the mask really that important? Because if it is, why aren't you all wearing it all the time? Why are you only making sure you're wearing it when you're on camera or when you're in public and people can see you? If it's really that important, why is it coming off? So it makes people go, maybe it's not really that important. Maybe you're just telling us to do it because you've already said to do it and you want to keep that line going, or maybe you just want to control us, or maybe there's a million things your brain can think. But again, if it was so important, why wouldn't you be wearing it all the time? I at least give Trump credit. He doesn't want to wear the mask. Although he did the same thing. He went to the Michigan plant and he didn't wear the mask when he was on camera, but he wore it the rest of the time, which again, I get why no leader wants to wear a mask. I get why anybody wants to. It's a horrible way to walk around. But you can't tell everyone to do one thing and then do another. It makes people cynical. It makes them distrust. And it makes them decide that perhaps, just perhaps, they have a right to take matters into their own hands and do what they think is best because they no longer trust you. And that falls on our elected leaders for their weaponizing of this issue. And it falls on the media for, instead of trying to be objective, weaponizing all this information. So people think the media is just trying to scare them. And the sad part is, if it is true that we are going to start another outbreak, I don't know if it is, because people weren't wearing masks all over the country at lakes and beaches and pools. Well, that's really sad. But it's not because people are a bunch of idiots. People look out for their own self-interest. They don't feel they need to because they think they're safe. And they don't believe they're going to infect millions of other people because only 90,000 people have died of this, almost 100, which is a horrible number. But it's not enough to where everybody knows somebody who has it. Most people don't. Or everybody knows somebody who died of it. Most people don't. And when such a high number of cases are in New York still, most people around the country don't know someone who has it, or certainly don't know someone who's died of it. That doesn't mean nobody does, but it's not enough to make people think I'm going to kill someone I love or I'm going to kill myself. So it's all making for a bad series of choices because we can't stop weaponizing information. How bad is the divide when it comes to Trump? How hostile is it? I've got two fun videos here just to lighten the mood a little bit that will show you just how much people can't stand Donald Trump. Bruce, can we play that first video with the mixed race couple there?
Yep, you got it coming up.
How much would I have to pay you to sleep with Donald Trump?
Oh, hell no, I ain't doing that shit.
How much? Come on. $1 million?
You can't pay me nothing.
Not enough?
No. No price.
20 million?
No.
$1 billion?
No.
$1 billion?
Hell no.
Hell no for $1 billion. How about you?
What the fuck?
He's not even in the thing. Okay.
Hey.
Okay.
All right. So that video, by the way, has 500,000 views on it. Clearly, it's something working in it. But what I think is so amazing is that woman is like, no amount of money. Now, obviously, I don't believe that. I think for a certain amount of money, most people would do almost anything, certainly having sex with even an abhorrent person. But how deep the hatred of Donald Trump is that she is like, no, $1 billion, no way. I could find somebody far more detestable, far uglier, whatever, and say $1 billion, and she'd be like, sure. I get the guy. He just didn't expect to get asked it. That had nothing to do with Trump. That was like, I ain't sleeping with a guy. I asked the question to someone else. And watch this response. How much would I have to pay you to sleep with Donald Trump?
No money.
No money.
No money.
How about $10 million?
No.
One time.
No.
$20 million.
No.
$1 billion.
No, I don't know the price.
Okay, it'll save your boyfriend's life.
Is that bad?
Yeah.
To save his life?
Yeah, his hair is really.
It's the hair.
It's the hair.
So, okay. And my point is, it wasn't even money at that point, right? And again, this isn't what people would really do. But her boyfriend, who, you know, she's there with, she's like, no, I wouldn't sleep with Donald Trump to save my boyfriend's life. That's how deep the distrust and the hatred goes. And while that's funny, the thing that's shocking to me is that most of that comes not from people knowing Trump or even looking at his policies. It comes from a message that has been driven home over and over again. Again, I'm not defending Trump. I know plenty of people have valid reasons to hate Donald Trump for his policies, for what he stands for his personality, all kinds of things. But that level of average person, and there are plenty of people who love Trump, by the way, too, right? I was just asking people in Hollywood where most people are not, you know, pro-Trumpers. But, you know, I'm not in Jacksonville. But at the same time, that comes from having a message drilled home over and over and over again that everything this person is, everything they do is horrible. He's so horrible that I wouldn't sleep with him for $1 billion. I wouldn't sleep with him to save someone's life. I mean, that shows you in just a fun way how deep that division goes and how deep that messaging impacts people. So real quickly, I want to shift gears. And I want to talk just for a few minutes about another side of this, which is the hatred and the violence that is emerging right now in the country. We're seeing people go into stores and attack clerks, attack people who are doing retail. We're seeing people pull up their masks and spit on people. We're seeing people do disgusting, offensive things around this. And we're seeing a rise in violence. Chicago had its most violent weekend in like 3 years over Memorial Day weekend, most violent Memorial Day weekend. Clearly, guns aren't going away. Clearly, violence isn't going away. People are feeling heat up, pent up, angry. And we're also seeing an ugly, with all this division, I think division seeds division. And where we have this massive political division, I think we're also seeing a racial tension and division continue to heat up. We've always had racial tension. I touched the show last Friday with Professor Jody Armour from USC. But you know, in the last couple of weeks, we've seen a number of racial events that are shocking still. Ahmaud Arbery was the first one. But then we just saw George Floyd in Minneapolis. And I'm sure if you follow the news at all, you saw what happened with the police, you know, crushing his neck and him screaming, I can't breathe, and not getting up, and he dies. And that means you have protests all over Minneapolis, people flooding the streets. By the way, you don't see CNN commenting how none of them are wearing masks or social distancing. Some were wearing masks, but I'm saying it's sort of convenient when you choose to report on the masks. Back to my not being objective point. And I understand the protests. People are like, you killed another black guy who was doing nothing wrong, who you thought was doing something wrong. They thought he'd forged a check. I don't care. Forging a check's not good, but it doesn't deserve you to get beaten up by the cops, much less have them put their knee on your neck, suffocate you to death when you're screaming, I can't breathe, die. Now, those cops will pay a price and they'll get punished, and they should. But it's the underlying fact that this continues to happen that's so shocking. And then in New York City, if you followed the events of the black man in the park and the white woman, and he asked her to put a leash on her dog, she refused. She said, I don't have to. He said, please put a leash on your dog. He was feeding the birds, and the dog's unleashed, and it's not him just saying it. You're supposed to put dogs on leashes in parks and in the bird sanctuary especially, so they don't chase the birds. She refuses, pulls out her cell phone, or he pulls out a cell phone, starts videoing her, and she says she's going to call the cops. And she's going to say that an African-American man is threatening her life. What makes you go there? What makes you go there? First of all, in the world we live in, what makes you not realize this is going to be all over social media and it's going to destroy you? But what makes you go there? And this woman turns out to be like a liberal. What makes you go? I'm going to call the police and say a black man is threatening my life because he is telling you, could you put your dog on a leash? Meanwhile, she's like holding the dog by its collar, like joking, whatever. He's not touching the dog. He's not threatening her. He's being polite. She's going to say he's threatening her life. Now, she has since taken it back, or not taken back, apologized and said she was wrong. She lost her job. She got blasted on social media. And to his credit, he has come out and said, because she's gotten death threats and stuff, and said, that's absurd. Stop threatening her life. Like, I don't like what she did, and I think what she did is racist, and she needs to examine her behavior because she doesn't think she's a racist. That was her whole thing. I'm not a racist, she said afterward. But what you said was pretty racist. I'm going to say a black man's threatening my life when he's asking you to put your dog on a leash. So you either thought it was true, which is really messed up, or you decided to make it up, which is equally messed up. But to his credit, he's like, don't stop. Don't, yes, she needs to change how she looks at the world and atone for that, but don't threaten her life, because violence is leading to more violence. And now and he had the best point of all of this, which was people were upset at her for saying about a black man, he's threatening my life, for using that kind of threatening thing. And once again, the minimizing the value of a black man's life. And now you same people are threatening her life. And he's like, what sense does that make? And it may have been the best point of the whole week. Our hatred, our divisions, our anger, our violence, what sense do they make? Well, really? Why do we just keep building on them and hypocritically doing the very things we accuse others of doing, and saying one thing and doing another, and using the very things we hate against those who we hate? It's a sick cycle, and all of us play a role in it. And I think our leaders and the media play a special role in having an obligation to start tempering it down, to de-weaponizing it. On the positive side, the two people in Central Park, the black man and the white woman, both of their last names are Cooper. Maybe there's something there. I'm Rob Nelson. Thanks for watching. Check out our Friday show. Like I said, all about faith. I've got a fantastic pastor from a big West Side church in Los Angeles. We're going to talk about the churches reopening, the First Amendment, and faith, finding faith and losing faith. Thanks for checking out Rob Nelson Live. See you Friday.